I live in Washington, D.C., and I don't know what a hurricane is like. So tell me what Hurricane Maria was like for all of you.
I've covered education for almost 18 years, and recently I was in Puerto Rico doing a story on how that school system was coping 1 year after Hurricane Maria. And I realized there's so much I didn't know. Starting with, until very recently, Puerto Rico was the third largest school system in the US.
And if I can get like this, and I really didn't think I would get like this, you can imagine the students.
So I would ask people, how are you doing 1 year since Hurricane Maria? And everyone would just start crying. And then I realized that was kind of the wrong question, because the hurricane still felt so immediate to them. Tens of thousands of homes haven't yet been rebuilt. Power and water is still very intermittent. School buildings, hundreds of them are still damaged. And families are really in a state of flux.
We still have a lot of children that one of their parents is in the States and the other one is here. So a lot of instability, children not knowing what the future will bring.
So one thing I want to be really clear about is that even before Hurricane Maria, schools in Puerto Rico were really struggling. For the past decade, each year about 20,000 kids have been leaving the school system. Hurricane Maria doubled those numbers.
So you went from an under-resourced, struggling system to an under-resourced, struggling system deeply, profoundly damaged by the hurricane.
The vast majority of children in the school system are low income, and the education department is this vast bureaucracy that has a history of financial mismanagement. And even though these children are US citizens, the way the federal government funds them is very different from the funding formula that, say, children on the mainland receive.
Well, I think it goes to the politics of colonialism. It goes to the politics of the island being treated not as a state would be, but rather treated as a possession of the United States.
The federal government doesn't even publish Puerto Rico's graduation rate, and their test scores are really bad.
The NAEP scores this year, in 8th grade, there was not one student, not one, who demonstrated proficiency.
So it's against this backdrop that there are huge changes in Puerto Rico's public school system playing out. Julia Kelleher, the Secretary of Education, made the decision to close almost 250 schools this year because she said they were half full or they were damaged. And this, remember, is in addition to almost 170 schools she closed last year.
Let me tell you, no one wants to have to close schools. It is heartbreaking, it is emotional, it is saddening. It's necessary.
So as you can imagine, a lot of educators are feeling a lot of anxiety, and both the teachers' unions on the island oppose these changes.
Teachers are being relocated to distant schools because of the school closures. A lot of them don't have transportation, can't drive because they have disabilities, and they are being forced to move further away from their homes to reach the new schools.
Another big change in the education system, the introduction of charter schools.
The government needed or used the hurricane as an excuse to achieve their plans of privatization.
Charter schools are publicly funded but privately run, and until this year in Puerto Rico, charter schools were illegal. In spite of all the challenges I saw and the problems in the educational system, I think my takeaway was a reminder about the role schools play in our community. I mean, in Puerto Rico, it was so obvious after Hurricane Maria. The schools, people who were homeless moved into schools and were living there. School kitchens became where everyone was cooking and feeding the entire community. Teachers came, and even though their homes had been damaged, they came to help rebuild the school roof or cut down trees.
Así que entiendo que todo está perdido, es un nuevo comienzo.
Don't worry. We pray. No. Vas a salir adelante.
It really was so obvious that schools are the backbone of this community. All this matters because Puerto Ricans are US citizens and they move back and forth between Puerto Rico and the mainland.
All our fates are bound up together. To the extent that folks in Puerto Rico are suffering, that's a missed opportunity for the rest of the country.
And for economic growth anywhere, you need a strong educational system. But most of all, it's a matter of justice.
I gave books to a kid. I'll never forget their eyes. I handed him the book, and his eyes were like saucers because they haven't had an experience of starting school and somebody giving them a book. That's got to meet the definition of injustice, right?